And the panel coming up, and as we mentioned earlier, Trade Minister Simon Crean was in Shanghai and has tried to raise the case of Stern Hu with authorities. Before we hear from our panel, here's what Simon Crean had to say yesterday.
No, I don't have concerns about the way in which the matter is being handled. It's being handled back home by the Foreign Minister, treating it correctly as a consular case. What we have stressed, because this is the first opportunity we've had to convey the message government to government, the importance of process being dealt with expeditiously, and of course with further and better particulars being made available. We're also of the view that what has been done here is in accordance with the agreement, the consular agreement that we have with China.
So I guess it's all a matter of judgment about how best you go about this if you want to get a result. The government thinks low-key is the way to go, but you also get the impression if they could, they would have access at a higher level than what they've managed to achieve so far.
I think they're trying to feel their way. What's the best way to achieve the optimum outcome? The optimum outcome, of course, being bringing Mr. Hu home without rattling the Chinese, allowing them to keep face. All those sorts of things are incredibly important. I would imagine there's a flurry of activity behind the scenes, which is the way these things are quite often worked out diplomatically behind the scenes. And I think the business community also will be rallying in relation to trying to define what it is that has changed in the way business is done, because there's the way businessmen do deals in China is very differently to the way it's done here.
There would be, Michael Stutbridge, some nervous businessmen around now, wouldn't they? If they get the feeling that when the Chinese want to send a message, given the nature of their law, it's not that difficult to find a document that, under their law anyway, can be regarded as suspect.
Yeah, I think it is a very worrying development, Barry, that it shows that the economic development between the two countries, and I don't think really Australians fully appreciate the extent to which the whole Australian story is now latched on to Chinese industrial development. You know, we're avoiding a recession because of a fiscal stimulus package, not one that's come out of Canberra, but one that's come out of Beijing, and they're buying our iron ore and coal, and that's holding the whole place up. You know, the maternity payments, the pension increases, all the sort of the big cream of the wealth that's been produced over the last 10 years has come out of this China boom. Now this really shows how much the economic sort of relationship between the two countries has moved far ahead of the social, cultural and sort of legal relationship between the two. So you're right that if you are a businessman and you're trying to do what might be normal commercial practice, but we don't know all the facts of the matter, or maybe getting on the edges of commercial practice, that suddenly the power of the Chinese state can end you up landing in jail. That's a worrying development.
I mean, this is what happens when you make a pact with the devil, basically. I mean, we, for the reasons that Michael eloquently put, tend to view China in a benign fashion, or pretend that it's not a totalitarian regime. And every now and again, because we pretend that it's not a totalitarian regime, we get a mighty shock when something like this happens. And we just have to accept the fact that it's not a government. You know, we regularly refer to the Chinese government. I mean, the fact of the matter is it is a regime. And the other thing that's quite obvious out of all this is during those Chinalco negotiations regarding Rio, the whole story that China put out that these are independent commercial entities is just not true. They are state-owned enterprises.
And the Foreign Minister, Stephen Smith, probably went to the nub of the problem when he had this to say during the week.
Frankly, it's difficult for a nation like Australia to see a relationship between espionage or national security and what appear to be suggestions about commercial or economic negotiations.
Now, he's been choosing his words very carefully all week, but when he said earlier in the week that they were very surprised by this arrest, is that code for him saying he's not one of ours? If he is a spy, he's not one of ours?
Well, it seems, for the reporting this week about Mr. Stern Hu, is that he's a very well-known, recognised businessman of great integrity and high regard, and has worked in China for some time. It would be the surprise thing that you mentioned about Stephen Smith. I mean, I don't know who he would have been sending a message to there. If he was one of the government's informers, then you would expect that the government would be working furiously, the same way as it is here now, I think, working behind the scenes, to try and also get a cabal together of businessmen within Australia who are going to be prepared to act as de facto negotiators, if you like, behind the scenes, to try and put the view to the Chinese authorities that this is going to be very, very damaging trade-wise and very damaging to business interests between the two countries.
There's no question that China's muscling up here. I mean, I don't think there's any question about that. And really...
it's just what motivated it in the first place.
But it limits our options in terms of responses too, and I think there's another point to be made here, is that, funnily enough, we all thought that China was going to be one of Kevin Rudd's foreign policy strengths. In fact, it's turning out to be one of his foreign policy weaknesses in terms of the ambiguous signals he sent, particularly through the Defence White Paper, and then all his efforts to, in public, look as if he's got special access via, his speaking of Mandarin and so forth. I mean, it is a test for Kevin Rudd here. Can he pick up the phone? Can he get this sorted out?
Well, it's a difficult relationship, isn't it? A very difficult relationship too.
I think you'd want to, if I was Stern Hu, I'd want the government to be working furiously behind the scenes. I'd probably want the Foreign Affairs Minister to be making highest level talks that he could with his counterparts. I'd also want a little bit of sunlight calls by the opposition to make a little bit of an issue of it without sort of ratcheting it up. And I think so we've really got to sort of work on solving this particular issue, resolving the issue, not letting it get out of hand, and then laying the case for where do we go to in the future with this? How do we develop the relationship between China and Japan, China and Australia commercially, that this sort of thing reduces the risk this comes up again in the future.
So other Australian businessmen can feel a little more comfortable about doing business.
We've also got to send the message that it's simply unacceptable, surely.